Hello everyone, it is Mr. Gix here, and today we're going to be talking about another one of my personal decks. This is an EDH or Commander deck we're doing today, and the Commander is Nekusar the Mindrazor. Nekusar is a 5 mana card in 2 blue, black, and red, so Grixis colors. Perfect color combination if I don't say so myself. It is a 2/4 legendary creature zombie wizard. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card, and whenever an opponent draws a card, this Nekusar the Mindrazor deals 1 damage to that player. So this deck is all about extra card draw. So let's get started. First of all, we have removal spells to the deck. So we have Feed the Swarm. It can destroy any creature or enchantment card. You lose life equal to that card's mana value. The cost of this is generally not so bad, so it's always a good card to have, very versatile. Next we have Tyrant Scorn. You can destroy any 3 mana or less cost creature or return a creature to its owner's hand. It's an instant, so it's an awesome way to deal with an attacker that you just can't deal with otherwise, or to destroy low-cost creatures at the start of the game. Terminate is another good card. So this one is a black and a red, so you can destroy any creature, and that creature can't be regenerated. Gets around to regenerate when it rarely pops up, and otherwise it's a great removal piece for an instant 2-drop as well. Imprisoned in the Moon. Awesome card. It turns any commander into a land with no abilities, so you can get rid of any commander-based plays. Gets rid of big creatures and turns them into lands. Awesome card to just get rid of pesky abilities that you couldn't get rid of otherwise. We have counter spells in Arcane Denial. So you counter target spell, its controller draws up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next end step, and you draw up to 1 card. Not only is it just a 2-cost counter spell that's better than the normal average counter spell, but it draws you cards which fits into the theme of the deck. We have another counter spell in Mana Drain, counter target spell for 2 mana, just the same as counter spell, but you get the bonus of having colorless mana equal to that spell's mana cost that you've counted during your next main phase. Force of Negation is another good card. If it's not your turn, you can exile this, or you can exile a blue card and cast a spell without paying its cost, so it can be a free counter spell. You counter target non-creature spell, and that card's exiled instead of being put into its owner's graveyard. Going into card draw now, we have Kami of the Crescent Moon. Lets everyone draw an additional card during their draw step. Great card for the deck. One more card for your opponent's draw, sure, but it deals them more damage. We have Stormfist Crusader. It's a lovely card. It makes everyone draw a card and lose 1 life during your upkeep. You do as well, but you get to draw more cards, and your opponents draw more cards during your turn, meaning they have less likely to be able to play that card. Phyrexian Arena is another great card. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose a life. You might be losing the life on this, but your opponents are being drained faster than you are, and you get another bit of card draw. Well of Ideas is an awesome card. At the enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. At the beginning of everyone's draw step, that player draws an additional card, everyone else's draw step. And at the beginning of your draw step, you draw 2 additional cards. So you're going up 1 card versus your opponent, and you get the 2-card draw at the start. Thought Reflection is a great card to keep on top of your opponents. It draws you additional cards. So if you would draw 1 card, you draw 2 instead. If you would draw 4 cards, you draw 8 instead. And it doesn't affect anything about draw step, which means you can draw it. You draw the extra card no matter what. If you're drawing cards, you're drawing that. Going into tutors here, we have Vampiric Tutor. It's a 1-cost, puts the card on top, you lose 2 life. You can find any card though, and it's an instant, so you can do it during your opponent's end phase. Then we have Demonic Tutor. Can put any card from your deck straight into your hand. Great way to get out a pinch if you need to. We have Diabolic Intent. It's a 2 mana as an additional cost, sacrifice a creature, search a library for a card to put into your hand. Solve the equation. You can search for any instant or sorcery card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Vaziketh's Right. Awesome card. 5 mana, can put a card into your hand, but it also has cycling, which is another great mechanic in this deck. Whirlpool Rider can grab your hand and put it back into your library, then draw that many cards. Magus of the Wheel. Everyone gets to discard their hand and draw 7 new cards. Your opponents are going to take a lot of damage because of that. Wheel of Misfortune. Each player secretly chooses a number, 0 or greater. All players who reveal this number simultaneously and determine the highest and the lowest. If you're the lowest, then you get nothing done. So say 2 people chose 0, nothing happens to them. If you're the highest, you take damage equal to the number you said. So if you choose 10, you take 10 damage. And if you're not the lowest, so if you're the highest or the middle, you discard your hand and draw 7 new cards. We have Windfall. Everyone discards their hand and draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. Awesome card to just refill. Teferi's Puzzle Box, definitely a favourite of mine in the deck. Everyone just shuffles and redraws their hand during their upkeep and draw step, not upkeep, draw step. And because of that, it's going to be lots of damage going around on the board. We've got Dragon Mage, and everyone just discards their hand and draws 7 new cards anytime this thing deals damage to a player. It's also a great flying defender, and it's a 5/5. Going into Ramp here, we have a very expensive card that I do not suggest you buy. I would honestly suggest you just get packs and open them up, though good luck finding one nowadays. This is Jeweled Lotus from the Commander Legends set. You sacrifice Jeweled Lotus at 3 mana of any color, but that mana can only be spent to cast your commander. So you can't use it for abilities, you can't use it to cast anything else, it can only be used for your commander. It's a great way to get your commander out really early as maybe turn 3, without any other support, but could be as early as turn 2 with certain cards. We have Wayfarer's Bauble. So this is sacrifice this card by paying 2 mana, and you can go find a basic land card and put that card onto the battlefield tapped. Great land ramp there. We have the classic Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, both great staple cards for any commander deck. Soul Ring can tap for 2 mana and be brought out for 1, and Arcane Signet can tap for any color your commander's color identity. Next we have is Dimir Signet, Izzet Signet, and Rakdos Signet. Love 2 mana artifacts. Most of the ramp in the deck is 2 or less because it's just faster that way. It makes it a bit more competitive. Then we have Talisman of Dominance, Creativity, and Indulgence. Same thing as the others ones. These are the talisman versions of them. Being able to tap for mana of colors by dealing on damage to yourself isn't too bad. You can also just tap for generic mana. Then we have the Dockside Extortionist. Enters the battlefield, everyone creates a treasure token where X is the number of artifacts. You create X treasure tokens where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. Awesome ramp card, can get out big things quick. Burnished Heart comes into play. It's a creature, it's a blocker. Sacrifice it to find land. Very versatile card. This card is a great card. It gives no max hand size, which means you don't lose the cards you're drawing, and it can tap for generic mana for 2 cost. Another no max hand size card. This one, however, can replenish your life total. So if you have 7 cards in hand at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 7 life. In this deck, it's not that uncommon to have like 20 cards at the start of your turn. We have Chasm Skulker for the benefits of you drawing cards. You put counters on this whenever you draw a card, and when it dies, you create X squid creature tokens with Island Walk, where X is the number of counters on it. So, as you're drawing throughout the game, this thing will get bigger and bigger and become a threat, and if it's ever removed, then you get tons of little threats. Awesome, versatile card. Psychic Corrosion is one of my favorite cards from when I started playing. It was in my first ever standard deck that I built myself, and it's been a favorite card of mine since. Anytime you draw a card, your opponents put the top 2 cards of the library into the graveyard. This is an amazing card for the fact that you're already making your opponents draw so many cards, and when you're drawing cards on top of that, and then punishing them for you drawing cards as well, they're just going to eventually either deck out or take too much damage for them to handle. Incrag Pyromancer is a great way to get rid of small threats or just deal extra damage to your opponent anytime you draw the second card for each turn. So if you draw 2 cards during your opponent's turn, it will trigger this as well. A new card that I put into the deck is Gixian Puppeteer. 4 mana, 4/3. Anytime you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. Awesome card because of the fact that you're draining your opponents during your draw steps as well as theirs. And whenever this dies, you can turn a creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's also a good recursion card. Psychosis Crawler is another amazing Phyrexian. So you draw a card, each opponent loses a life, so it's punishing your opponents when you draw cards as well as them now. And it also is as big as the number of cards in your hand. So again, this is not uncommon for this thing to become a 20/20. Another new card in Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. Anytime you draw a card, its loyalty ability goes up. Amazing effect because of that. Then you can -12 it, which shouldn't be too hard in this deck again. So target opponent chooses a permanent they control, returns it to their hand, and then they shuffle every other non-land permanent back into their library. So it's just a one-sided board wipe against one of your opponents, and if you can keep it going, then your opponents just won't be able to keep up. Assume it's going to die before then, though. The Locust God, one of my favorite cards as well. Anytime you draw a card, you create an insect token with flying, red and blue insect creature token with flying and haste. It does have the ability to return from the graveyard. It does have the ability to draw cards, but most likely you're going to be wheeling with this, drawing those extra cards. You'll want to just create an army of tokens from drawing. It will help protect your board and protect you against any flying threats that might come at you. Niv-Mizzet the Firemind will punish your opponents anytime... Whenever you draw a card, you can deal 1 damage to any target, so it can punish your opponents, or you can choose to get rid of a threat that needs to be gone. Okay, so these cards I'm now doing are ones that strictly benefit off you wheeling or discarding. So, Archfiend of Infer will, if you wheel, say, a hot hand of 8, this puts 8 -1 counters on all your opponent's creatures. It's a constant board wipe in a deck like this. Your opponents won't be able to keep up with their creatures, and it's just amazing how many things it gets around, how big things turn weak under it. Tergrid, God of Fright. Not many people like this card. I understand why. This is an awesome card to have in a wheel deck, though, so it doesn't really care about your opponents sacrificing stuff. That's a benefit for later on. If you wheel, then you're discarding and your opponents are discarding. So, say your opponents all have a hand of 7 and you wheel, that's a total of 21 possibilities where those things that they're wheeling could be permanents, and that could be 21 cards straight onto your battlefield. Okay. Underworld Dreams punishes your opponents whenever they draw a card. It's another version of your commander. Same with Omnixilis here, but it can also get rid of threatening creatures and force their opponents to draw more cards, or you could use it on your own creatures to draw more. This card is not good with your command. Card's a non-bow with your commander, so it's not a good card in the deck. I have it in here because I sometimes like to stop my opponents from getting all the extra card draw I'm doing. So those extra card draws would only affect me. I would be drawing the cards, getting up advantage. They would not be. Assume they're just going to have no hands at that point. So you're just going to draw so many more cards. They won't be able to draw any more extra cards. Awesome card to have. It punishes your opponents so badly. It uses your own deck to advance your board without advancing theirs. Sword of Feast and Famine, 3 mana, protection from black and green, which is an awesome card. It gets rid of most your black standard decks of removal and such. And then when it deals damage to a player, the equipped creature meaning, that player discards a card, so you're getting rid of a bit of their advantage, and you get to untap all your lands, meaning you can play a bunch more spells that you've drawn. Doom's Necromancer has the ability to sacrifice himself to return any creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Awesome card to get back on any of your big stuff that you couldn't otherwise. Jorian Ruin Diver is another great card. Anytime you cast your second spell each turn, you draw another card. Spark Double is mostly in here to copy your commander, but can copy any of your other legendaries or your other planeswalkers that you want to copy. Versatile, awesome card. A pet card of mine in Mana Barbs, it makes it so your opponents playing their cards that they're drawing, they get punished for that too. Assuming they don't have many artifacts, they're going to want to have to play cards all those cards they're drawing out, otherwise they'll have to discard them. So they're just going to get punished severely. It's an awesome card. It does punish you, but with all those 2 mana artifacts, it's very unlikely you're going to need to use your lands as much. And even if you do, they're going to get way more punished than you. Notion Thief, definitely a favorite card of mine. Turns the card draw that your opponents would be getting into card draw for you. So not only does it stop your opponents from drawing their cards, that also gives you their card draw instead, meaning all those card effects that trigger when you draw cards are going to happen every single turn. They're going to be amazing, especially with Psychic Corrosion back over here. So with all the extra card draw and Psychic Corrosion out, your opponents could be milling 10 cards every single turn. And yeah, that's just an amazing card to have. We got Torbrand, Thane of Redfell. It makes it so your commander deals 2 damage to your opponents whenever they draw a card. Amazing card because of that. It also makes Incrag Pyromancer deal 5 damage to any target, meaning it can get rid of so many more threats. Amazing card just for a little bit of extra value. Mana Bards will deal more damage. An expensive card, but an awesome one. We have Omniscience. It's very common that you get this thing out. Like, I've not had a game so far that I haven't gotten Omniscience out before. It depends on the play style of your opponents. It just lets you play every card in your deck for free, basically. Anything that's in your hand, you get to play for free. With wheel effects, it means you can keep refilling your hand, play out your hand, cast another wheel effect, play out your hand again. Your opponents are getting punished. It's an awesome finisher in the deck. Getting on to win cons, we have Mind Crank. Mind Crank lets you, so when an opponent loses life, they input that many cards on the top of their library into their graveyard, so they mill a card anytime they take a damage or lose life. The reason this is a win con is because it pairs with this card, Dustmantle Guildmage. Its first ability makes it so whenever a card is put into your opponent's graveyard, they lose 1 life. So then, all you have to do is you have both these on the battlefield. You activate this ability, so whenever an opponent's card is put into the graveyard, they lose a life. If you don't have any other way to make them mill, then you use this ability as well. What will happen there is by paying with this ability, you can force an opponent to put 2 cards into their graveyard, which will lose them 2 life, which will then trigger the Mind Crank. So since they lost 2 life, they're going to mill 2 cards, which will then trigger this. Since they milled 2 cards, they're going to lose 2 life. So it's an infinite combo of just milling out your opponents or forcing them to lose all their life. This is a great combination. There's other cards that triggers off this that you can make it so all your opponents are losing that life and milling those cards at the same time. Another win con in the deck is Peer into the Abyss. With your commander out in the battlefield, it's an instant kill for any of your opponents. They're forced to draw half their library, which means they're going to lose life equal to the amount of that, and they lose half their life as well, so they're definitely going down to 20 at the least, assuming they're not a life gain deck, and then from there they just have to draw 20 cards with your commander out. Going into lands now, we have Command Tower, Xander's Lounge, and Crumbling Necropolis as cards that can tap for any of your colours. Cycle lands, we have Barren Moor, Lonely Sandbar, and Forgotten Cave as 1 mana cycle. We have Desert of the Glorified, Desert of the Mindful, Desert of the Fervent as 2 mana cycle. We have Bounce lands in Demir Aqueduct, Izzet Boiler Works, and Rakdos Carnelian. Canarium, sorry. Rick's Marty Dungeon Palace, just a great way to get your opponents to put cards into their library for that lovely Dustmantle Guildmage effect later on. So we have the Center of the Sea, meant everyone draw extra cards if you don't have any other way to do it. And another card that lets you draw extra cards but forces them to discard a card as well. These two have the Swamp and Island and Mountain archetypes. Thriving Buff, 1 enters black, 1 enters red, and they can both enter for blue or red or black as another colour. Foreboding Ruins and Choked Ezeri, both can enter untapped as long as you can reveal a swamp, or in this case a mountain, in this case an island as well. We have Sozakin and Otawara, great for channeling out, or otherwise they're basic land types basically. Grixis Panora can go find any of your basic lands that you might need for fixing. Reliquary Tower gives you no max hand size. Emergence Zone lets you play cards for flash speed, meaning you can play the cards you're drawing on your opponent's turn during their turn. Witch's Clinic gives your commander lifelink, so whenever they're dealing that damage, they're also gaining you life. Do that before wheel and you gain lots of life. Ancient Tomb can tap for 2 at the cost of dealing you 2 damage. Temple of the False God can tap for 2, but you have to have 5 or more lands to do that. Exotic Orchard can tap for any colour that your opponent's lands can tap for. Training Center can tap for a blue or red. Bajuka Bog can exile an opponent's graveyard. Then you have your 2 swamps, your 2 mountains, and your 2 islands. And that is the deck. So overall, we have all these lovely cards, these lands. Every card, basically, to make the deck work. Every card either draws you a card, stops your opponents from doing stuff. It's a very interactive deck, so your deck is very much this deck is very much a deck that wants to stop your opponents from stopping you with counter spells, gets rid of creatures that you need to. Overall, Nekusar's definitely one of my more favourite commanders. I am definitely a Grixis player and hope to do more decks in the future. Okay, enjoy your day, everyone. I hope you've had a nice time. I hope my rambling and mumbling didn't do too bad. and hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful year. Bye now.